Ethan Vance had been in space long enough to know when something was wrong. He had just finished unloading the last crate of mineral ore from his small cargo ship, the Wayfarer, onto the docking platform of Argos 9, the busiest trade station in this sector. It was supposed to be an easy day. Deliver the goods, sign the forms, get paid, and maybe buy a cup of strong station brew before heading back to his ship. But today, the air in the docking bay felt different. The usual crowd of engineers, merchants, and wandering aliens was gone. Instead, the entire place was lined with armed guards in silver and blue armor. Their helmets had smooth, glassy faces, and the barrels of their weapons glowed faintly. Behind them, banners hung from the high ceiling, each one bearing the golden crest of the Andalith Empire, a name Ethan had only heard in news reports. Andaliths were powerful, ancient, and very proud. They didn't usually come to human stations unless something big was happening. Ethan was about to ask a nearby dock worker what was going on when a sudden voice boomed across the bay, magnified by some unseen device. "Make way for Her Highness, Princess Zara of the Andalith Empire!" Every guard in the room slammed a fist to their chest in salute. Even the station's commander, a gruff man who normally didn't bow to anyone, lowered his head. Ethan stayed still. He was a cargo pilot, not part of whatever royal event was happening here. His plan was simple: keep his head down and quietly slip away. But that plan ended the moment the princess walked in. She was tall, her silver-blue skin catching the light like polished metal. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with heat, but with the kind of steady light that made you feel like she could see right through you. Her armor was more ceremonial than practical, made of crystal-like plates that shimmered when she moved. A thin circlet rested against her forehead, and flowing strands of pale hair framed her face like threads of starlight. Behind her, an entourage of nobles followed, their robes trailing behind like living rivers of color. Ethan couldn't help staring. Not because she was beautiful, though she certainly was, but because she looked completely out of place here in a dusty human cargo bay. The princess stopped in the center of the docking area. She looked slowly from face to face, as if searching for something or someone. This is it, Ethan thought. She's picking an important envoy, or a guard, or maybe a hostage. Either way, it's none of my business. He took a careful step backward. Then her eyes locked on him. For a second, Ethan thought she was just looking past him, maybe at someone behind. But no, her gaze didn't move. In fact, she tilted her head slightly, as if curious. Without warning, she raised one arm and pointed directly at him. Every helmeted head in the room turned. "I choose this human," she said, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that made Ethan's stomach tighten. The words echoed in the silent air. Ethan blinked. "Wait. What?" he whispered to himself. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The nobles exchanged shocked looks. Even the station commander frowned, clearly as confused as Ethan was. Two guards in silver armor began walking toward him. Hold on," Ethan said, raising his hands. "There must be some mistake. I'm just a delivery pilot. I don't do royal business." The guards didn't slow. Princess Zara stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his face. "There is no mistake," she said. "You will accompany me." Ethan's mouth went dry. "Accompany you? Where exactly?" "To my ship," she said, as if that explained everything. Ethan laughed nervously. "Yeah, no, see, I have a job to—" One of the guards gently but firmly took him by the arm. Not roughly, but in a way that made it clear he wasn't going to be allowed to walk away. The princess spoke again, her voice calm but carrying an edge of authority. "You have been chosen for the trial of the bond. It is a rare honor among my people." "I don't even know what that is," Ethan said quickly, trying to keep his voice steady. "You will learn," she replied simply. Ethan looked around. The docking bay, hoping someone would step in and explain this, was all a big misunderstanding. But the station commander just gave him a helpless shrug, as if to say, "Better not argue with royalty." The guards began escorting him toward the large, gleaming vessel docked at the far end of the bay. It looked nothing like the blocky human freighters nearby. Its hull was smooth, with swirling silver patterns that seemed to shift when he looked at them. The air around it seemed warmer somehow, and faint lights ran along its curves like streams of liquid energy. "Look," Ethan tried again. "You've got the wrong guy. I don't even know your customs. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not—" "You are exactly what I need," the princess said without hesitation. Ethan didn't know if that was comforting or terrifying. They reached the boarding ramp. The princess stepped aboard without looking back. The guards waited for Ethan to follow. He hesitated. Behind him was the familiar safety of the station. Ahead of him was a royal ship belonging to one of the most powerful empires in known space, and a princess who, for reasons unknown, had just declared him her choice for something called the Trial of the Bond. Ethan took a deep breath. "Well," he muttered, "this is going to ruin my schedule." Then, with no better options, he stepped aboard. The moment his boots touched the strange metal floor, the ship's ramp closed behind him with a soft hiss. Somewhere deep inside, the engines hummed to life. Ethan realized with a sinking feeling that whatever was happening, he was officially part of it now. The ship was nothing like Ethan had ever seen. Human vessels were noisy, smelled faintly of oil, and always had a hint of dust no matter how much you cleaned them. This ship was silent, almost too silent, and the air was so pure it felt like breathing inside a mountain cave after rain. The walls shimmered faintly, as though tiny specks of light were floating just under the surface of the metal. Two guards led Ethan down a wide corridor. The floor curved gently, giving the odd feeling that the hallway itself was part of a living creature. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, changing color as they passed. "Do these things mean something?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. The guard on his right answered without looking at him. "They are life signs. They show the condition of the ship and its crew." "Right," Ethan said. "So if they turn red, we panic?" The guard didn't respond. Ethan sighed. Tough crowd. They stopped in front of a tall, arched door. The guard pressed his palm against a glowing circle, and the door slid open without a sound. Inside was a wide chamber with a ceiling so high it seemed to vanish into soft blue light. At the far end stood Princess Zira. She was no longer wearing her ceremonial armor. Instead, she wore a flowing robe made of some shimmering fabric that shifted between deep purple and silver. Around her stood several older Andaliths, each dressed in robes marked with golden trim. Their expressions were unreadable, but Ethan could feel their eyes weighing and measuring him like a piece of unfamiliar equipment. The guard stepped back. One of the older Andaliths spoke first, his voice deep and slow. "You have brought the chosen human princess." "Yes," Zira replied. "This is Ethan Vance of Earth. He will stand as my champion for the trial of the bond." Ethan cleared his throat. "About that, still don't know what it is. Pretty sure no one told me. The rules, or asked me." The older Andaliths glanced at each other, clearly surprised he had spoken so directly. Zira's expression didn't change, but there was a faint spark in her eyes, almost as if she approved. She stepped toward him. "The trial of the bond," she said, "is an ancient Andalith custom. It is more than a competition. It is a demonstration of trust and strength between the royal heir and a chosen representative from another species. For thousands of years, every heir to the throne has completed the trial before they can be crowned." Ethan frowned. "So you picked me to make you queen?" "Not queen," Zira corrected calmly. High Sovereign, and I did not pick. You for what you are. I picked you for what you are not. Ethan blinked. I don't follow. The princess turned to the others. Our empire has grown old. We have relied on our technology and our traditions, but we have forgotten how to adapt. Humans are different. You do not give up when things break. You change. You improvise. You survive. That is why I chose you. Ethan gave a short laugh. I think that's the nicest way anyone has ever called me unprepared. The older Andalith, with gold-trimmed robes, stepped forward. The trial will take place in 3 stages. Each stage will test the bond between you and the princess. You will be challenged by skill, by cunning, and by moral judgment. Success will bring honor. Failure. He paused, as if weighing whether to finish the sentence. Failure will mean the princess forfeits her claim to the throne. Ethan stared. So if I mess up, your whole royal career is over? Yes, Zara said without hesitation. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. No pressure, then. The princess stepped closer until she stood only a few feet from him. You may refuse, she said. If you do, you will be returned to your station unharmed. But I believe you will not refuse. Ethan hesitated. His first instinct was to walk away. He didn't know these people, didn't know their customs, and didn't like being dragged into politics. But there was something in the princess's tone, not arrogance, not command, but certainty. She genuinely believed he could do this, and deep down, part of him wanted to see what would happen. Ethan took a slow breath. All right, I'll do it. But I need to make something clear. I don't know your rules, your history, or your royal etiquette. I'm just going to be me. Zira's lips curved in the faintest smile. That is exactly what I want. The older Andaliths exchanged quiet whispers. One of them didn't look pleased, but none openly objected. Zira turned to the guards. Prepare his quarters. He will remain on the royal ship until the trial begins. The guards bowed and gestured for Ethan to follow them. As they walked out, Ethan glanced back at the princess. She was already speaking quietly with her advisors, but her eyes met his for just a moment, and he couldn't shake the feeling she knew something he didn't. Ethan's quarters were far more comfortable than the tiny bunk on the Wayfarer. The walls glowed with soft light. The bed was large enough to stretch out without bumping into a wall, and there was even a window looking out into the endless stars. Still, he couldn't relax. He sat on the bed, staring at the window. Trial of the Bond, he muttered. Sounds like something from an old storybook. Except in this one, the unlucky human is me. A chime sounded at the door. Enter, Ethan called. The door slid open and Zara stepped in, alone this time. Thought royalty traveled with a full escort, Ethan said. They wait outside, she replied. I wanted to speak to you privately. She moved to the window, looking out at the same stars he had been staring at. I know you do not understand our ways yet, but I ask you to trust me. The first stage of the trial will be dangerous. There will be moments when our technology fails you. When that happens, your human instincts must guide us both. Ethan tilted his head. Sounds like you expect trouble. I do, Zara said simply. There are those who do not want me to succeed. They may try to interfere with the trial. They may target you. That's comforting, Ethan said dryly. The princess looked at him then, her glowing eyes steady. Ethan Vance, if you stand with me in this, we will succeed. If you walk away now, I will not stop you. But the chance to change more than just your own life may never come again. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship filled the silence. Finally, Ethan gave a half-smile. All right, Your Highness. Let's see what this trial throws at us. Zara inclined her head. Good. Rest tonight. Tomorrow the first stage begins. As she left, Ethan lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what was coming, but for the first time since stepping aboard, a spark of curiosity outweighed his fear. Somewhere out there, beyond the window, his first test was waiting. The next morning, Ethan woke to a gentle chime and the soft glow of lights brightening in his quarters. The ship's voice, calm, smooth, and not entirely human, spoke. "Champion Ethan Vance, report to the central hangar. The first stage of the trial begins in 1 hour." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. 1 hour? He didn't even know what the stage was about yet. Still, he dressed quickly and stepped into the corridor. 2 guards were waiting for him, their silver-blue armor polished, to a shine. The walk to the hangar was silent except for the low hum of the ship's engines. Ethan could feel the faint vibration under his boots, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. When they arrived, the hangar doors opened to reveal Princess Zira standing beside a sleek, arrow-shaped shuttle. She wore light armor now, not ceremonial but practical, made for movement. In her hands was a strange staff-like device with glowing lines running along its length. "Ethan," she said, her voice carrying easily in the wide space, "the first stage of the trial will take place on Orcs 4, a shattered moon in our outer territories. The moon is rich in rare minerals, but the storms there make it dangerous to navigate. We must cross its surface and retrieve a fragment from the ancient vault at its center." "Let me guess," Ethan said. "There's a catch." "There are many," Zara replied without hesitation. "Electromagnetic storms disrupt all advanced equipment. Navigation fails. Communication fails. Most would not dare to attempt it without the protection of our finest machines." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Then why send me?" "Because sometimes," she said, "machines fail, and people do not." The shuttle ride was short, but tense. Through the small window, Ethan could see Orcs 4 growing larger, a gray, fractured world split into jagged pieces by some ancient catastrophe. Great storms swirled across its surface, flashing with strange green lightning. When they landed, the airlock opened to a blast of dry, electric wind. Ethan stepped out onto the rocky surface and instantly felt his hair stand on end. His suit's visor displayed a warning: electromagnetic interference detected. Zara stepped beside him. "The vault is 10 kilometers east. We must move quickly. The storms shift without warning." They began the trek. The ground was uneven, covered with sharp stones and deep cracks. Above them, the sky boiled with dark clouds that occasionally lit up with flickers of light. Halfway across, the first storm hit. It came with a loud pop in Ethan's ears as his comms cut out. His visor display went dark. The faint hum of Zara's staff sputtered and faded. Even the guidance drone hovering ahead froze mid-air and dropped like a stone. "Great," Ethan muttered. "Tech's dead." Zara frowned. "We will have to wait for the storm to pass." But Ethan shook his head. "If we wait, we'll lose the path entirely. Storms like this don't blow over. They move, and when they move, they mess with landmarks." She tilted her head. "You have a solution?" Ethan crouched, picking up a few pieces of metal from the crashed drone. He pulled a small compass from his belt, something he always kept for just-in-case situations, and began making quick adjustments. Zira watched, curious. "That device is primitive." "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling faintly. "But primitive doesn't break when fancy things do." He tied the compass to a strip of drone casing, aligning it so they could track their heading without electronics. Then he glanced up at the sky. "See how those clouds are moving? The big dark one's the core of the storm. We'll skirt it on the west side. The winds should push us toward the vault." Without waiting for approval, he started walking. After a moment, Zara followed. The storm didn't let up. In fact, it got worse. Sharp gusts of wind threatened to knock them off balance. Dust and tiny shards of stone stung their suits. Ethan kept his eyes on the compass and the angle of the clouds, adjusting their path whenever the wind shifted. Zara said little, but he could feel her gaze on him, studying his every choice. Finally, the ground sloped downward into a narrow canyon. At the end of it, a massive metal door stood embedded in the rock. The vault. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, glowing faintly even in the storm. Zara approached and placed her palm against the door. The symbols flared, and with a deep rumble the metal slid open. Inside was a chamber filled with crystalline formations, each glowing. With a soft inner light, Ethan stepped in cautiously. "So which one do we need?" Zara pointed to the largest crystal in the center. "That one? It is a fragment of the ancient core. We must bring it back to prove our passage." Ethan was about to step forward when the ground shook. A deep, metallic growl echoed through the chamber. From the shadows, a massive guardian construct emerged. 4 legs, a body of black metal, and eyes like burning coals. "Of course," Ethan muttered, "because this wasn't dangerous enough already." The guardian moved toward them, each step sending a tremor through the floor. Zara raised her staff, but sparks jumped along its length. The storm's interference was still strong. Ethan glanced around. The creature was too fast to outrun in the narrow chamber, but its body was heavy, and the ground beneath them— "Zara!" he shouted. "The floor is unstable! We bring it down! We trap it!" She hesitated, then nodded. Together, they moved in opposite directions, forcing the guardian to shift its weight from side to side as it tracked them both. Each step it took made the cracks in the floor wider. Finally, Ethan grabbed a loose crystal shard from the wall and hurled it with all his strength at the guardian's front leg. The impact made it stumble forward, just enough for the weakened floor to give way. With a deafening crash, the guardian fell into the pit below, its glowing eyes fading into darkness. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Remind me to never sign up for a hiking trip with you again." Zara gave the faintest hint of a smile. "You handled that well, human." They retrieved the central crystal and began the trek back to the shuttle. The storm still raged, but Ethan's improvised navigation kept them on course. When they finally reached the ship, the systems flickered back to life as they rose above the storm. In the quiet of the cabin, Zara studied the crystal in her hands. "Stage 1 is complete," she said. "You have proven that instinct and adaptability can succeed where our technology fails." Ethan leaned back in his seat, tired but strangely satisfied. "Glad I could help. So, what's next?" Zara's eyes met his, calm but unreadable. "Next," she said softly, "we return to the palace, and that is where the real danger begins." The royal palace of the Andalith Empire was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. It wasn't built of stone or metal, but of a strange living crystal that shimmered in shifting shades of silver and blue. Towering spires reached so high they seemed to touch the clouds, and bridges of light connected them like delicate threads of a spider's web. The entire structure floated above a wide river of glowing water, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. The shuttle landed on a platform, carved into the side of one of the palace towers. As Ethan stepped out, he could feel hundreds of curious eyes on him. Courtiers in flowing robes whispered to each other. Guards stood in perfect formation, their silver armor gleaming. He leaned closer to Zara. "I think your friends are staring at me." "They are not my friends," she said quietly. "And some of them are not pleased with my choice." Ethan gave a dry smile. "Great. I love a warm welcome." Inside, the palace was even more overwhelming. The hallways glowed faintly, the walls covered in delicate carvings of past rulers and great victories. Everywhere they went, people bowed to the princess, though Ethan noticed some bows were quick and stiff, not respectful. They reached the grand hall, where a long table stretched almost the length of the room. At the far end sat Lord Kairos, a tall Andalith with sharp features and a robe trimmed in black and gold. His eyes were a colder shade of blue than Zara's, and his smile didn't reach them. "Princess Zara," Kairos said smoothly. And the human. Ethan gave a small wave. Hi, that's me. Kairos's smile widened, though it still wasn't warm. It is unusual to see a human in the Grand Hall. I trust the first stage of your trial went well? It did, Zara said simply. Kairos's gaze shifted to Ethan. I wonder, do you truly understand the responsibility you hold? One mistake, and the princess's claim to the throne will be lost. Ethan met his eyes. Guess I'll have to make sure I don't make one then. Kairos chuckled softly, but said no more. That night, a grand gala was held in the princess's honor. The palace's great ballroom was filled with music that seemed to shimmer in the air. Lights floated above the guests, casting soft colors across the crystal walls. Ethan stayed close to Zara, trying not to look too out of place among the elegant Andalith nobility. Many glanced at him with polite curiosity, but just as many looked at him as if he were a misplaced tool in a treasure chest. As the night went on, Zara was called to speak with various dignitaries. Ethan wandered toward the refreshment table, scanning the strange foods, glowing fruits, sparkling drinks, and something that looked suspiciously like floating jelly. That was when he noticed something. Near one of the side balconies, a servant moved oddly, too tense, too deliberate. In their hands was a tray, but beneath the cloth covering it, Ethan saw the faint outline of a weapon. His instincts kicked in. He began moving toward them, weaving through the crowd. The servant stepped onto the balcony, glancing around before reaching under the cloth. Ethan's pace quickened, just as the figure raised a small, sleek device, not aimed at the crowd, but at Zara across the room. Ethan lunged forward. He grabbed the servant's wrist, forcing the weapon down. The device fired with a sharp pulse of light, hitting the floor and leaving a scorch mark. The ballroom went silent. Guards rushed in, grabbing the servant and pulling them away. Zara appeared at Ethan's side, her eyes sharp. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan kept his voice low. "Someone just tried to shoot you." Kairos stepped forward, his voice smooth. "How unfortunate. It seems your choice of companion has quick reflexes, Princess." Zara ignored him, her gaze fixed on Ethan. "You saw it before it happened?" "I've seen that look before," Ethan said. "Back home, it's the kind of look someone gets when they're about to do something stupid." Her expression softened slightly, though her tone stayed formal. "You may have just saved my life." Later, in her private chambers, Zara stood by the window while Ethan leaned against the wall. "This was not random," she said quietly. "Someone planned this. Someone here." Ethan nodded. "Kairos." Zara didn't answer immediately. "He has long sought the throne. If I fail the trial, he will take my place. But even he would not risk an attack so bold, unless he thought he could hide behind others." Ethan thought for a moment. "Then we need to make sure there aren't others. We need to make it so any move against you feels like walking into a trap." She turned to face him. "And how would you do that?" He gave a small grin. "Back home, we call it making noise. Make them think we're stronger, faster, and more prepared than we really are. If they believe we expect every trick, they'll hesitate to try anything." Zara studied him for a long moment. "That is not an Andalith way of thinking." "Exactly," Ethan said. "That's why it might work." The next morning, the palace buzzed with news of the attempted attack. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the attacker was part of a rival house. Others claimed they were a mercenary. But through it all, one detail was clear. The human had stopped them. In the training hall, Ethan sparred with Andalith guards, showing skill he didn't entirely have. Zara made sure there were always observers. She spoke loudly about their strategies for the next stage, letting the right people accidentally overhear. By the end of the day, the whispers had changed. People spoke of the princess's human champion as unpredictable, dangerous, and hard to catch off guard. That night, Zara met Ethan on one of the palace balconies. The river below shimmered in the moonlight. "You have shifted the balance," she said. "Those who watch from the shadows will think twice now." Ethan leaned on the railing. "Or they'll try harder." Her eyes met his. "Then we will be ready." Somewhere deep in the palace, a bell chimed, a reminder that the second stage of the trial would be announced soon. Ethan straightened. "What's next?" Zara's gaze turned toward the horizon. "A test not of strength but of choice. And in the council chambers, every choice has a cost." 2 days after the gala incident, Ethan stood outside the High Council chamber. The tall crystal doors shimmered with faint light, and through them he could hear the low hum of voices. This wasn't going to be like the first stage on HFY or the political dangers in the palace. This was different. The guards at the door stepped aside and Princess Zara appeared beside him. She was wearing her ceremonial robes again, deep silver with flowing blue trim, but her face was serious. "Today," she said quietly, "is the last stage of the trial. You will stand with me before the council. A decision must be made, one that will affect our empire for generations." Ethan gave a short nod. "And I'm guessing it's not going to be an easy one." Her eyes met his. "No, and the council will not expect you to speak. But if you do, they will listen." The chamber was vast, with seats arranged in a wide circle around a glowing table. Above them, the high ceiling opened into a dome that showed a real-time view of the stars. Seated in the council's curved benches were the most powerful leaders of the Andalith Empire, each wearing robes marked with the symbols of their houses. Lord Kiros sat among them, his cold smile returning when he saw Ethan. At the center of the glowing table, a holographic image flickered to life, a lush green world covered in forests and shining lakes. "This," Kiros said, standing, "is Valoran, a newly discovered planet rich in rare minerals our empire needs. Its atmosphere is compatible with our species. Our survey ships found no advanced civilizations, only primitive native life forms. It is the perfect site for expansion." Several council members murmured in agreement. Kairos continued, "I propose we claim Valoran for the Empire immediately. We will extract its resources, establish a colony, and use its wealth to strengthen our fleets. This will ensure our place among the stars for centuries to come." The chamber buzzed with support. Zara stood slowly. "Valoran is unclaimed, yes. But it is inhabited. Its life forms, though primitive, have their own balance. To take it without care would be to destroy that balance forever." Kairos spread his hands. "They are not sentient, Princess. They do not speak. They do not build cities. They cannot object." Ethan shifted in his seat, feeling his jaw tighten. Kairos turned to the council. "We cannot afford hesitation. The Empire's strength depends on decisive action. I call for an immediate vote." Before the vote could begin, Ethan stood. Every eye turned toward him. He wasn't wearing royal robes, only the plain jacket he had traveled in, but his voice carried, clearly across the chamber. "I'm not one of you," he began. "I'm just a human. I don't know all your history, and I don't understand all your customs, but I do understand something about choices. And I've seen what happens when people take something just because they can." The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the hologram. "Back on Earth," Ethan continued, "there's an old saying, you don't burn the forest to light the campfire. Sure, Valoran might not have cities or spaceships, but it's alive. It's not just empty land waiting for someone to own it. You take it, and yeah, maybe your fleets get stronger. But something unique will be gone forever, and you can't get it back once it's gone." A few council members shifted uncomfortably. Kairos's eyes narrowed. Ethan kept going. "Where I come from, strength isn't just about having the biggest ships or the most resources. Real strength is knowing when to stop yourself, when to walk away from something, even if it's easy to take. Because if you only measure power by what you can grab, you'll never stop grabbing. He glanced around the chamber. You're talking about Valoran like it's a prize. I'm asking you to think about it like a neighbor. If they're not a threat to you, why make them one? Why not find a way to trade? Share knowledge? Leave them space to grow? The silence that followed was heavier now. Zara's gaze was fixed on Ethan, but she said nothing, letting his words hang in the air. Finally, one of the older council members spoke. You suggest restraint from an empire built on conquest? Ethan nodded. I'm suggesting a choice. You can take Valoran and prove you're strong enough to grab it. Or you can leave it and prove you're wise enough not to. Kiro stood sharply. This is sentiment, not strategy. The trial is meant to prove the princess can lead, not to entertain human ideals. Zara's voice cut through the tension. And yet, is that not the purpose of the trial? To learn from the chosen champion? To see through the eyes of another? She stepped forward, her voice steady. I stand with my champion. Valoran will remain untouched. Instead, I will propose a research pact, one that allows us to study its environment without harming it. If its people one day rise to meet the stars, we will meet them as equals, not as conquerors. The council erupted into debate. Some agreed, others protested, but the rules were clear. The princess had the right to make the decision during the trial. After several tense minutes, the High Chancellor raised his hand for silence. The decision of the princess stands. Valoran will remain unclaimed for now. The matter is closed. When the session ended, the council members filed out, some nodding politely to Zara, others avoiding her gaze. Kairos passed them without a word, his expression unreadable. In the quiet hallway outside, Zara turned to Ethan. You spoke well, and boldly. Ethan gave a small shrug. Back home, that's just called talking too much. Her lips curved, in the faintest smile. In this case, it was exactly what was needed. They walked toward the palace balcony, where the evening sun cast golden light across the city. The air was cooler here, the noise of the council chamber far behind them. Zara rested her hands on the railing. With that choice, the trial is complete. There are those who will say I should have taken Valoran, that I chose weakness. Ethan leaned beside her. And there are those who will remember you didn't take what you didn't need. Where I come from, that's not weakness. That's leadership. For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Then, somewhere deep in the palace, a bell rang, a signal that the trial's results were about to be announced to the entire empire. Zara turned to Ethan. Whatever happens next, you have changed the path I walk. Ethan smiled faintly. Guess we'll see where it leads. The bell's deep chime echoed through the palace halls. Ethan followed Zara to the ceremony hall, a vast space with crystal walls that shimmered like frozen starlight. Hundreds of people were gathered there, nobles, guards, citizens, and messengers from distant worlds. The air was thick with anticipation. At the far end of the hall stood the High Chancellor, holding a staff topped with a glowing crest of the Andalith Empire. When Zara entered, the crowd parted, and all eyes turned toward her, and toward the human walking at her side. Ethan tried not to fidget. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight. Back home, the most attention he got was when his cargo ship was parked in the wrong docking bay. But here, every whisper in the crowd seemed to carry his name. The Chancellor struck the staff against the floor 3 times, the sound ringing clear. The trial of the bond is complete, he announced. Princess Zira of the House of Alien has faced the 3 stages. The test of passage, the test of survival, and the test of judgment. Each has been met in the company of her chosen champion, Ethan Vance of Earth. He turned to Zera. "By ancient law, the council will now hear your final words before the result is declared." Zera stepped forward. Her voice was calm but carried to every corner of the hall. "I chose a human because I wished to see my people through different eyes. In the trial, Ethan showed me the value of adapting when technology fails, the strength of standing firm when danger closes in, and the wisdom of walking away from what we could take but should not." Her gaze swept the room. "Some will call that weakness. I call it strength. For an empire to last, it must not only build ships and cities, it must also build trust." She stepped back, and the Chancellor raised his staff again. "By the will of the Council and the completion of the trial," he said, "Princess Zera of Alien is hereby named High Sovereign of the Andalith Empire." The hall erupted in applause. Ethan exhaled slowly, realizing just how much pressure had been riding on every choice they'd made. After the ceremony, the celebration began. Music filled the air, and the great hall transformed into a sea of moving colors and voices. Nobles approached Zera to offer congratulations. Some sincere, others clearly just trying to align themselves with the new ruler. Ethan stayed near the edge of the room, happy to let Zera handle the politics. That was when she approached him, carrying a small silver emblem in her hand. "You have a decision to make," she said. Ethan blinked. "I do?" She nodded. "I will not ask you to stay in the Empire against your will. You may return to your ship and your life on Earth. But," she held up the emblem, "I also offer you the position of Ambassador of Earth to the Andalith Empire. You would be the bridge between our worlds. You would help guide our first steps toward understanding each other." Ethan looked at the emblem. It was shaped like the Andalith crest, but with a single star at its center, a star that he realized was meant to represent Earth. "That's a lot of responsibility," he said slowly. "Yes," Zera agreed, "but you've already shown you can carry it." Ethan thought about it. Life as a cargo pilot had been simple, predictable. Maybe too predictable. Out here in the middle of this strange empire, he had been forced to think fast, take risks, and make choices that mattered. And there was something else. Earth. Humanity was still small in the galaxy, barely noticed by most of the great powers. But now, because of one princess's choice, they were on the map. He took the emblem. "All right, Your Highness. Let's see if humans and Andaliths can get along without blowing each other up." A faint smile touched her lips. That is a worthy goal. Later that night, the two of them stood on the palace balcony. The city below glowed like a field of stars, and above them, the real stars stretched endlessly. Ethan rested his elbows on the railing. "You know, when I woke up a week ago, I thought my biggest problem was whether the docking fee was too high. Now I'm apparently an ambassador." Zera looked at him, her glowing eyes reflecting the starlight. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "Not even a little. But I'm going to have to send a very confusing message home." They both laughed softly. The next morning, news of Zera's coronation and her human ambassador spread across the empire. Some worlds welcomed the idea. Others grumbled that a lesser species had been given too much influence. But the decision was made, and the message was clear. The new High Sovereign would not rule exactly like those before her. As for Ethan, his first official act as ambassador was to send a message to Earth's leadership. It was short, but to the point. Met aliens. They're not all bad. Also, one of them made me ambassador. We should probably talk. Weeks later, Ethan stood on the bridge of a royal cruiser beside Zera. They were heading to a diplomatic summit on a distant, neutral station. The first time an Earth representative would meet with the leaders of multiple star nations at once. He glanced at Zera. "You know, this all started because you pointed at me in a docking bay." She tilted her head, her tone calm but with a faint trace of humor. "And I was correct, was I not?" He grinned. "Guess we'll see." The stars outside shifted as the ship entered faster than light travel. Ethan felt that now familiar mix of nervousness and excitement. The galaxy was bigger and stranger than he had ever imagined. But now, humanity had a voice in it. And somehow, that voice was his.